Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. For those seeking CPE credit today, you must answer at least 3 polling questions and remain on the session for its duration. Polls can be found under the Polls tab on the right-hand side of your console next to the chat feature. Afterwards, if you are eligible to receive credit, you will receive an email with a link to your certificates. If you have any questions, please email cpe@argyleforum.com. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would love to introduce our moderator, Jason Mount, Senior Director of Finance at Thermo Fisher Scientific. We're excited to have Jason and our panelists with us for a session titled Growth Strategies for 2025 and Beyond. Welcome, Jason, and over to you.
Thank you, Brittany. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Myself and we'll go through a brief introductions here, and then I'll go through with the team. We have some questions which we'll go over, and we'll leave time at the end as well. If there are any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Put them in the Q&A, and then we'll try to save some time at the end to try to see if there's any other questions that we could discuss and kind of give our thoughts on together as a panelist team here. For myself, as Brittany had mentioned, I'm the Senior Director of Finance currently with Thermo Fisher Scientific. I've been with Thermo Fisher Scientific for about 7 years now, predominantly kind of as a FP&A leader for a business unit in a division, basically overseeing kind of end-to-end P&L, as well as the overall financial performance for the group. Previously, I was at a couple different companies, including in different industries, including Logitech, as well as spent about 9 years at Honeywell. So now we'll start with introductions for the panelists. Harold.
Hi, everyone. My name is Harold Valdez. I'm a manager of finance strategy analysis at Netflix. I've been here coming up in 3 years, and previously I had about half a decade experience consulting across multiple industries.
Good day, everyone. My name is Thomas. I'm CFO of CRISP here in Atlanta, Georgia. CRISP is the nation's fastest growing law firm growth company, focusing on brand videos, social campaign management, and law firm business coaching.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lampa. I am the SVP of Finance for Pluto TV, which is Paramount's free ad-supported streaming service on the television side. My background is really around like tech, media, and entertainment. I spent quite a few years before this taking some of the world's most loved brands public, including Sweetgreen and Spotify. And I now lead the finance function at Pluto TV, which saw an unbelievable amount of growth over the last 4 years since I've been here. And I'm based in sunny Los Angeles, California.
Hi, everybody. Monica Ciesielczyk. I am currently a principal consultant in Skya Solutions. Prior to that, my experience has been mostly in life science, biotech, working at Novavax, but also for nonprofit prior to that. I'm bringing here experience with a global FP&A, and I'm happy to be part of the conversation. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. So now let's go in right to the questions, and this will be more of a discussion as well. So there's several questions that we have, and why don't we start? One of the first kind of questions I think that we'd love to kind of hear thoughts on is in terms of the top priorities and growth strategies for CFOs and their teams for the new year. And any thoughts or kind of comments on what that would be for 2024. So maybe Thomas, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, Jason, sure, I'll take that one to start. So top priorities and growth strategies that CFOs across the nation and globe are looking at, from my perspective, is digital transformation and technology investments. So that would be acceleration of the adoption of AI, very hot topic, as well as business intelligence. For that, improved efficiency and decision making. It's very important to invest in financial technologies, and you can enhance your analytics, reporting, and strategic decision making that way. I know, Chris, we are looking to enhance our business intelligence process. We're actually actively hiring for a director of business intelligence, and we're looking to implement data warehouse and a new BI tool this coming year. Along with that, cybersecurity is always a topic of concern every year. So as far as Chris is concerned, we always go through our audit checklist. We make sure the backups are working. We have correct updated internet policies. Antiviruses are the best available. Going down the list, cost management. This is anybody in finance goes through this. Implement those cost reduction and operational efficiency measures to improve just the overall function of the company. We've seen a lot in tech industries, that tightening of the wallet, as they say. Also, we're looking at revenue diversification. So not just, as a business, you don't want to rely on one stream of revenue, same in your personal life, so expanding to new markets. And then ultimately, finally, it would be really stakeholder communication, focusing on making sure you're delivering adequate financial results and clear expectations to all the stakeholders that are involved in the finance company. I'll pass it on to anyone else on the panel who wants to jump in, or wherever you want to move on with, Jason.
Yeah, I can jump in. Thomas, I think you brought up a really hot topic. AI, generative AI. I think a lot of us, the past year or so, have been really looking and investigating into how we can leverage this in the business. With some, right, it's pretty obvious. Like if you're in the kind of Google, Microsoft realm, it was like a slam dunk in how you could use it. For some of us, like for instance, our entertainment, it's obvious, but it's also a lot more tricky in how we apply it. With talent and strikes and everything. So where I'm going with this is we're definitely reevaluating it in a sense of what's real versus what's noise, and what's applicable now versus what's cool but may not be useful for another half decade, for example. So I think like when we're thinking about growth strategies, we're trying to invest money and where it makes sense. And a lot of that has to do with like, where does it make sense for your core business?
You brought up one other thing, Thomas, as well, in terms of business intelligence. Is that kind of talked about as a priority, or any thoughts from anybody else specifically regarding how to improve the BI capabilities of your team, and if that's something that's a focus area for 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I can take this one. For us, the relationship between financial planning analysis and business intelligence is one of the most important ones that we have in the organization. There's really nothing that we do without sort of like understanding our KPIs and understanding the measures by which the organization is determining what we consider success. I think a lot of this year, especially for us, we've been sort of in such a huge growth mode over the last 4 years, is really around understanding how to go really deep on certain things, like understanding our sort of true drivers of capacity, which, for example, for a television service is actually like very complicated, because you can slice and dice this into sort of like an unbelievable amount of different ways. And so our relationship with business intelligence is really sort of, I would say, centered around working together to give them the true understanding of the business, so that they can use their technical skill sets in order to best answer like true real life questions. So sort of using those two very complementary skill sets. We're very good operators with a great understanding of what's going on and how things work. They're unbelievably technical, able to understand our data sets, and how do the two come together to actually, tell a story.
Yeah, that's good. Actually, that brings me to I know we'll talk about kind of talent at a later point. But I've always found as well, from my experience, that it's having great, being able to hire great FP&A people in particular. They want to be able to not cleanse data all day long, but they want to be able to have great tools, right, where they could use that to get insights. And a great BI system is important for that as well. So I know we'll talk about that later though in terms of talent. Okay. Anything else about growth strategies or priorities that maybe didn't come up already that anybody wants to mention? No? Okay. We can keep moving on. So, okay. So I think, all right, in terms of from your different experiences, and we have a pretty diverse background in terms of the companies and kind of where each of you guys are working at and your experiences. How can finance teams successfully reevaluate their needs and reposition their organizations for long-term success? And please share any examples that you may have.
Yeah, and I can jump on this one. I think starting at a high level, we really need to have it helps to have a culture where you're setting kind of like a ownership, accountability mindset. I think with like the finance org specifically, unfortunately, we can be seen as like service people, right? And then sometimes that doesn't help. Instead, with setting up a culture of being like a co-pilot to the business helps kind of set that accountability and the mindset of we're both doing this together and not just the business making decisions. So I think with that, when you set the culture, you hire the right people, and we're going to have a section on hiring and getting talent and how to assess that. But let's assume you have the right talent, you have the right people that really embrace that culture and have the skill sets. Then you can get into a situation where people or your team is empowered to make decisions on the fly and kind of reassess things as opposed to kind of go, fall into groupthink and not really challenge the status quo. So when you're in that position, I think you need to constantly reassess. Where are you realistically now? Where are you where you set your goals? Where are you in the market? Where are you with like the economy overall? Kind of what is happening, and then really point to where did you want to be or where do you want to be, and really assess that gap. So when you have situations where you're investing in particular projects or initiatives, whether it's financial systems, accounting, or more broader strategic bets or things like that, you're able to really look at the facts and the data that's coming in, and if it doesn't make sense or it's starting to turn sour, then you can pivot. You can make decisions to start, reevaluating and kind of reinvesting in other areas that might make more sense. So I think when you have that, and when you're a co-pilot and you're accountable, you can have those more discussions with your business leads as opposed to kind of, being, a little fearful or not as empowered as to kind of push them in that direction. So I think like real world examples, I think a good example of pivoting, everyone's familiar, maybe some of you are familiar with, Netflix a couple of years ago, or the whole entertainment industry went through this landslide of challenges with the stock market basically saying, hey, growth is not happening anymore. Memberships anymore. It has to be a more diversified revenue. We heard that, that feedback, and our stock basically plummeted at that point. But as a business, we were able to sit there and start asking those questions, making the hard decisions, and really looking at, hey, we've said before we're not going to get into ads. Well, we need to challenge that now and get into ads. And that kind of thinking, and from the ground up of being able for our leaders to hear us and say, we see the opportunities in these particular areas. Let's pivot. Let's go there, and let's do it quickly. Having the right talent, having that mindset of from the ground up, being able to feel that you own a particular part of business allowed us to pivot very quickly and essentially, launch other areas of opportunities. To Thomas's point early on, diversifying revenues, which was something that in our culture was like longly held that we wouldn't get into ads, we wouldn't crack down on password sharing. So, so far it's been a success, and it really is a testament to being able to have that culture and being able for all of us to feel empowered in how we're running our business.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think Harold's got it right. I think really it comes down to the age-old SWOT analysis. Make sure as a company, every year you go through your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and all those things will funnel out, and then you get your team involved, and it's all about execution from there. So I think that's succinctly how I look at it. Make sure you run the SWOT analysis every single year, and that's it.
And maybe what are your thoughts in terms of how the finance team is kind of what part they can play in that as well, Thomas?
Yeah, I think to Harold's point, they're co-pilots. The finance organization is co-pilots. Typically, you see things through numbers that you can't see otherwise. Finance is typically the organization that tends to ground the sales team, tends to ground the marketing team, and it's one that puts up the red flag if there's issues right off the bat. So it comes down to being a partner. You have to have a seat at the table during that SWOT analysis and your strategic planning. But that's where finance can really shine, because you have models that predict out to the future. And during those analyses, you can bring up those things that you see. So I'm with Harold as a co-pilot along the journey of the business.
Yeah, and I will also add to that. To me, always you are totally right, both of you. Totally agree with you. Finance being the integral part of the business, being the strategic business partner, helping understanding the data and analytics behind, but also the big thing that's happening right now, why we're talking about AI and other tools, is access to information, right? The sooner we can provide analytics to the business, the sooner they can start making decisions.
And I think that goes back to what Anais was referencing, and I think Thomas, you were as well, in terms of business intelligence being a priority for, at least Thomas, your organization, right, for 2024.
That's right. Yeah, we're actively hiring for business director of business intelligence. So
yeah,
if you know anybody, let us know.
We heard you initially. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also want to add to this. I think one very valuable piece that a finance org can offer is being like a strategic partner. Almost being that counsel to the business that uses numbers and is a little bit more grounded. But also, I think we have a unique position that we touch multiple parts of the business, and when we communicate and we're able to really collaborate within the finance org, we're almost like I don't know if a lot of you watch Game of Thrones. We're almost like Varys from Game of Thrones. We just know kind of the secrets of the org. We know what's happening. We have the pulse on the org, and we're able to kind of guide our stakeholders to make decisions where they're really siloed in their business. They're really just focused on their particular budget or line items instead of really thinking holistically what's best for the company. So I think that's a value add that I think as we get into hiring the right talent, it's something you kind of look for, someone that's curious, someone that just doesn't, focus on their particular role or scope, but also thinks about the broader business as a whole.
Great points. Thank you, everybody. We're going to go on and take another question, which is we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but in terms of maybe if you could talk about your organization, or also just what you're seeing, or how examples from before, but maybe looking ahead, what are organizations doing to attract, hire, and retain the best finance talent?
Yeah, sure, Jason. I could take this one. So I mentioned Crisp is hiring for multiple roles. The first part of that is attracting talent. So it's easier said than done, but you want to make sure the organization is set up to be an organization where someone wants to work there. And so there's a lot of things that can be done that way. We can get into them. Along with the hiring, I think of it as, how do you hire the best talent overall? And obviously, since we're in finance, we're looking more for the finance. But if you also have any oversight in any of the other functions, at Crisp, we use a hiring funnel. Okay, so that means a candidate has got to go through a funnel process. They've got to complete various tasks along the way. And that's how we look to hire the best available. And so so every role that we put out there has a test assignment. So if you're hiring for FP&A analysis, you're going to have a 4 or 5 question test assignment that they've got to fill out and complete within 24, 48 hours, whatever you want to do. We also go through and we utilize some third-party items such as the Wonderlic. Everyone's heard of the Wonderlic score, Colby, Print. So we go through a myriad of things to make sure that we are hiring the best talent. And then ultimately, as far as retaining the talent, you want to make sure you have a positive work culture that has high standards, because everyone knows that A players want to work with other A players. And as far as retaining, every career path, every job that we have at Crisp has a roadmap to success of their career would progress. We make sure that we include enhanced learning opportunities along with that. And we make sure that the first 90 days are very structured. Okay, so those are very important things, and particularly for finance and in general, you want to invest in your teams and you want to invest in finance tools. So you want to make sure you've got the very best tools at the fingertips to drive the best and most long-term focus of your company.
Any other thoughts on what Thomas said.
I'll share a few. I actually think that I'm very sort of philosophically aligned with what Harold was saying earlier. For me, attracting talent and then ultimately retaining them there's a few things which are really important. The first one is that element of curiosity. For me, it's really important to bring people in who actually are very passionate about businesses in general, because ultimately they could come in sort of like working on FP&A on the marketing side, but then in a couple of years, how are you going to continue to keep those people motivated? We have sort of a rotational system where you could move from from the marketing side to the content piece, from the content piece to more on sort of the KPI side, but also move into the more, I would say, sort of hardcore finance and consolidations. For me, it's really important that my team members are able to pick up technical skills quickly, but ultimately those can all be taught. And then it's really around being interested in the business and creating the relationships with the stakeholders, because in order to be a good strategic partner and a good co-pilot, you have to have a seat at the table. And in order to get that seat at the table, the business actually has to see the value in having a finance representative sort of, at their team meetings, at their offsites, and sharing sort of those thoughts and strategies before they are, sort of like up for approval. So sort of thinking about them really in the seeding stage.
Okay, you brought up something good, which was you talked about you could teach them the technical parts, right? If I heard you correctly, Anais. If I did, can you kind of expand on that? And then I'm thinking like the technical skills versus soft versus hard skills. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, for example, I'll just give you an example of what we use here at Pluto. So we are around the Google Suite. So a lot of people who are coming from sort of traditional media, especially, have never even used the Google Suite before. They're just like Excel. So for me, it doesn't really matter what type of skill set from a technical perspective they're coming in at, because most people are going to come in and actually get trained. We have a very good sort of like training program when we hire either new analysts coming out to school or analysts coming out of sort of different industries, sometimes with probably what I might consider as some bad habits, and then we sort of train on the technical side. What I have noticed is that spending a good 3 months in the front of the hiring process, especially on the more junior side, has really been able to yield a lot of benefits on the back end. Today, a lot of our FP&A sort of deliverables are all tied through a very intricate web, which are mostly automated using, BI, using Alteryx, and a very sort of simple Google suite of products actually allows you to do a lot of things on the technical side. Once that's up and running, the real focus on the growth on finance, FP&A, and operations for me is understanding that business. What are your leading and lagging indicators, and how do you work with the business in order to share with them the bird's eye view that you may have and they probably don't, right? So, yeah.
Okay, good. Any other thoughts on that? Otherwise, I had another follow-up question.
Yeah, just one more thing here. Just what I've been seeing too. The big one has been also, right, with attracting the talent. There's just this one side, right? Like we all will be in the office collaborating versus I would like to have flexibility. So from perspective of attracting talent, just generally, not even for finance, but also for finance too, right? The market seems to be very competitive for the good people, right? The important part is just to really understand everybody's situation and evaluate, right, how this applied to the current company's culture. And then also with that, the flexibility, right, that somebody might need, and is it truly required, for instance, to be for everybody on the site 5 days a week?
Are most people back to on-site or kind of a hybrid? Just curious. My company's more on-site, but / hybrid.
Yeah, I personally have seen this as, right, like we want to be in the office 3 times a week to remote, but I see more and more on site with some hybrid, but more push for the 5 days a week on the East Coast, with about on the West Coast.
Okay, thank you. Let's keep moving on then. So maybe another kind of question to kind of get your thoughts on is in terms of how are like organizations adapting to new environments, and trying to focus on doing more with less, which has probably been a hot topic here recently with a lot of the downsizing and restructurings, which some of us also may have kind of gone through most recently at our companies.
Absolutely, I'll take that one. And actually, Monica, to answer your question, so we are hybrid. We are very sort of global organization, so a lot of the team is actually based in New York, some is based in Los Angeles, and so for us, the hybrid work environment has worked very, very well. The office is always open, and we have some of my employees who actually live next door who love going into our West Hollywood location, but that's sort of much more of a sort of on a case-by-case basis if that's what they want to do. Sort of doing more with less, I think I'd probably take this question from two angles. So the first one would be as a leader of a finance organization, really sort of on my own people side, and then maybe the second piece would be like more as a CFO, how to sort of answer that question. So on the people side, I believe that when times sort of make us have to do more with less, a couple of things are really, really important. So the first one is reevaluating what it is that we're doing. Many times in finance organizations, especially if you have been around for quite some time, there is sort of this legacy amount of work which just continues to be done year in and year out, month in and month out. Is it actually necessary? For example, in my organization, we do monthly forecasts. We actually also have what I like to call sort of a real which has our LRP, which is basically a very detailed model that goes out 5 years, which is really easy to update. But certain parts of it require very deep dives. For example, I'll give you one thing, which would be the capitalization of internal labor, which is where we're developing internal software and putting that on the balance sheet. You don't need to do a full deep dive of something like that every single month. So if you are doing that, and if you're doing other things which are very time consuming, this is a fantastic time to start to think about, maybe we can, move this to a quarterly cadence. Maybe we can do this twice a year. What is the added value of sending out all of these reports? Is anybody actually looking at them? Maybe you even skip a month of sending just to see if anybody actually asks for it. And starting to think about how can I sort of like shift my focus on much higher value add activities versus other activities which sometimes just happen out of habit. Another thing from an organizational perspective is just like looking around and seeing if we can learn from our peers to see if other sort of teams within our company or other people within our own team are doing things in a more efficient way. And maybe this is the time for us to invest some time in learning from each other so that we can automate some of the processes. The third one would be really using the tools that we have at our fingertips. So if you're using Excel, you've got like Power BI. If you're using Tableau, you probably have products like Alteryx. These are ways in which you can sort of like invest 1, 2, 3 days of time, but ultimately save so many days and so many errors in the future by automating some sort of routine tasks. Then finally, taking this from the CFO's perspective, this is a really good time to bring your organization together to solve problems together. And what I mean by that is when we have sort of like pockets of resource allocations, it's always much better to actually have your teams try and figure out what is the most important thing for the organization together. Like, do we need to invest more in marketing? And so would you be able to fund that by making sort of trade-offs on the product and technology side, rather than just saying, this is your fixed budget and that's what you have to work with, sort of coming together and trying to understand how you can start to shift resources internally in order to achieve better results. And then I think the last thing would be really to ensure that every single thing that the organization is doing is going towards that like main goals and your strategies, rather than I guess there's a lot of what I like to call sort of like model drift, where we have sort of like these pockets which are working on things which might have been fads or things like that, and maybe this is the time to make those hard decisions and stop them.
And is it easy to kind of focus and decide what those critical few priorities are, Anais, from your experience?
I think it's easier for a finance person than it is for the rest of the business because every single person has their own agendas. So I would say that ultimately, Jason, it never is. But the more clear the vision and the strategy can be for all of your executives, the easier it starts to become to have sort of like more meaningful conversations. And sometimes it doesn't mean no, it just might mean not right now.
Yeah, I'll also add to that the other item here will be that if we make sure that everybody understands where we are heading, and that they have a option to propose changes, even things that others, right? Like sometimes when you are on the higher level, you might not be thinking about all the individual tasks that your team might be doing. But if you give them the freedom to propose changes, they might come up with solutions that you might not think of, right? Like, so one of the things that came up, a couple of weeks ago was that, well, when we were growing, we had so many different cost centers, right? But now we might not need that many. So should we come up with a new rule for decreasing the number of cost centers that will then streamline reporting, right? So maybe we'll come up with a different tools that actually will help with approval process. So there are there are certain things that we can delegate to the team members, and then they will feel empowered because they are actually driving the change.
Yeah, that's great, Monica. So I'm going to answer one of the questions that's out there. It's the question is, as organizations embark on digital transformation initiatives, could you provide some specific examples on successful implementations and share insights on what makes them effective in maximizing value for finance operations? This actually dovetails right off this question about doing more with less. So I could tell you my past companies I've worked on, I've implemented Hyperion planning, going into the cloud, as well as NetSuite going into the cloud. And what that did is it takes organizations out of spreadsheets, so Excel or Google Sheets. So you say, well, how does that transformation help finance overall? Well, one, it helps it in the way of you're more accurate. Okay, when you do things in the cloud, you're not sending spreadsheets back and forth across business owners, across business divisions, et cetera. You're also able to actually do more with less. You don't need as many people. And so it's a twofold process there. So what you want to do is evaluate your current structure of your company. If you are doing a lot of your forecasting, budgeting in spreadsheets, figure out if it's a cost benefit to go into a cloud-based solution. There are a lot out there that are on the inexpensive side. Of course, any Oracle product gets kind of expensive, but ultimately the transformation, one of the very first ones can be going into a cloud-based forecasting tool that will help you become more accurate, share data better, and reduce employee headcount.
Thank you. So let's keep going on then to the next question, which kind of relates to what we've been talking about, I think, at the beginning in terms of generative AI. But how has the FP&A function continued to grow in importance, and how can you get the most out of predictive capabilities?
Yeah, I will take this one. So with can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes, so with the growing, the FP&A function has been growing in the importance overall, right? And it has been changing. With the conversation about AI, what is coming up is the importance of accurate, timely information and data-driven decision making. So the organizations are currently seeing the huge value of having financial data available on their fingertips. And FP&A teams are playing critical role making sure that that information is available, is relevant to the organization and specific business units. Also, the business has been changing, right? So we are moving toward more complex global companies and global world, right? With more technological advancements, markets are changing very rapidly, So FP&A is the team who is able to help the organization navigate through that complexity and provide forward-looking insights. The big one that we talked about earlier too is that ability for the business unit and for the executive management actually have a strategic partner who is able to talk through financial information. So again, FP&A is moving simply from just traditional planning and reporting to actually the advisory role and contributes to the strategic decision making. The other big one is also risk management. So with the changes, so many unknown situation, we need the team that help us with risk management. And so FP&A is starting to play a critical role here as well. Also with investor stakeholders and investor and stakeholder expectations. There's an increased demand on the transparency and access to information. And with that, how can we write how the teams are actually working through it and making sure that we have that information that all the different teams need. So we talk about AI, but generally the idea here that the leadership team have actually access to the advanced analytics and technology. That seems to be the big one here, making sure that we have the tools. And AI came up, right, because AI is able to analyze information in a much rapid way and provide predictive capabilities, right? And just the whole idea of like, I want information now, I don't want information later, has been a big one for the CFOs and the CEOs. However, here I just want to put some caution, right? Just for everybody to be aware that for the AI to actually provide the accurate information, it requires consistent longer term data, right? So we cannot use AI just simply for the brand new organization because it does not have a trend information to be able to be accurate and helpful. Additionally, the big one here is that with the capabilities for FP&A, that what's coming is also that not only FP&A tools, right, accounting tools, but also the big idea of XP&A, which is that ability to integrate different data sources, not only from not only ERPs, but also possibly headcount, right, data from sales, data from personal information such as headcount, and that will help us with a better forecast, right? So if you have all this information in one place, you are able to use the financial modeling that gives you inputs, and then also work with the cross-functional, right, with all the departments, making sure that they are able to provide you with inputs and work with them together. So because those assumptions and inputs change rapidly, and they're also that will also help with the scenarios planning, right? So the big role of FP&A with the predictive analytics is not only AI, but also the ability to develop scenarios, right? Scenarios and sensitivity planning as well. So with this one, I would just say that the big one here is also making sure that the modeling is up to date. And then we still we are involved with the business and also with to ensure that the inputs and also accuracy of the information is still there. I can pause for a moment.
Yeah, and you brought up some of the tools, but I'm just curious, like I think I heard you mention Hyperion planning, and there's different levels of that as well in use, but maybe is there any certain tools for Monica or any people here that you guys really relied on and think have really helped from a predictive capability perspective?
Yeah, so like I'm a personally big one on adaptive insights. That seems to be the tool that is very flexible and also have predictive capabilities with a growing biotech company or maybe others who are rapidly growing and they don't have a consistent trend data. It is a bit more difficult to do a predictive analytics. But but that's a definitely very good tool. I would just say in those cases, I would just stress using a scenario and sensitivity analysis.
Any other tools from anybody? Otherwise, we can a couple more questions we're gonna want to get through. No? Okay. Okay. In terms of finance processes, we've touched on this already a little bit, but not so much systems, but more from a finance process perspective. What's the most important ones to automate or update first?
I can take this one. So I think that when, depending on what it is exactly your particular team is doing, I think if you're looking at sort of like a CFO role, there's probably certain things like AP, AR. Those are really, really important things to focus on automation, just because as your company is growing, those are just things you're just going to have to continue to just like add more people to if you're not scaling them, if you're not using tools. Now, sort of like looking at sort of more, I would say like strategic finance, FP&A side, it's really around the things which are recurring, right? So if you're having to do something every single month, then that should be fully automated. If something has a very high stakes of audience and is potentially, you know, so think about like your financial reporting, for example, that needs to be automated because you cannot afford to have a human error coming into these things every single month. I would say that, you know, so if you're thinking about sort of the Maslow pyramid of needs, like focus on the items which are going to have the biggest bang for your buck, focus on those first, and then go up in the chain.
Yeah, Jason, you might be on mute.
Sorry about that. I was going to say, any other thoughts on this one, or is everybody's finance processes running smoothly?
Yeah, they're always by the room for improvement, right, in finance. So there are different tools, right, that we can use. I would just say maybe it would be helpful to mention, right, like maybe some other processes from like do a roundtable very quickly and just say, are there any particular tools that that we used recently that were really helpful? I can maybe start, like not exactly maybe finance 100%, but it helped with project management and tracking of different activities. I mentioned adaptive insight, definitely very flexible. I recently, not recently, but I've been using also Smart Sheets, which is a really cool tool for from perspective of managing activities. And also it provides like calendar views to see where specific deadlines are coming up, right? So there are other tools like that, like in the Microsoft suite, but I've been specifically liking that one.
What about like data visualization tools? Like we've been using a lot of Power BI, there's Tableau as well. Is that something that other teams have been actively working with? I see heads nodding.
Yeah. So like, so the dashboard, right? Like to me, the dashboarding is really big. So some of the tools that I've been using, like that has the functionality of actually dashboarding. So the ability to have reports that are accessible to the business owner, right, at their needs, without us sending those reports, create this ability to access data whenever they want to, and increase the ownership.
Okay, maybe let's take maybe I think we may have time for one or two kind of questions from the team here that's joined. So maybe one question would be, what triggered you to change career to a different company? Would you leave for a growth opportunity even if you like what you do? It kind of talks about should I stay, or when should I know to kind of stay at my current company and current job, or when should I start to look for another opportunity? I don't know if anybody wants to kind of take that one from the audience.
Yeah, I can take that one. I've done a couple career changes. Honestly, this is probably the most personal question you can ever ask because it really just depends on your your personal wants and needs. So for example, if you're a person that's driven by growth, if you're very competitive, if like you see your former classmates getting promoted and it makes you feel kind of like, oh, I should be promoted too, then maybe you should think about the move, because it seems like that might be a reason that might be something that drives you. Or you could be in a sense in a state where, hey, you're starting a family, you appreciate the stability, and there's other factors that are not necessarily driven by growth, and maybe, staying in your current position and having a little bit of that stability is kind of like what you need in that moment. I will say that it changes throughout your lifetime. Different points you're more hungry, at other points you're not. So I think it's healthy to constantly reassess kind of what drives you in that particular phase in your life, and then make a decision based off that.
Yeah, I love that answer, Harold. I would say this question is probably something which so many of us and so many of our team members are constantly asking themselves. And I don't think that there's ever a point in anyone's career, unless you're really ready to retire, that you don't ask yourself this question. I would say a few things, and this is something which, I really believe strongly with my team, is that you should take those calls, have conversations with other companies, look at what other style of leadership look like, participate in these types of events to understand and to see how different leaders think about things and what starts to resonate with you. But I think the most important thing, and this is something which I probably learned the hard way, is not to necessarily leave a job, but to go towards a new opportunity. Meaning, don't just take a new opportunity in the hope that it's going to be better than what you have right now, but really go towards something where you're really excited about that new challenge, that new industry, that new role, because it will actually give you a much success.
Did we lose Anais?
Yeah, it looks like we did.
Okay.
I think she had a great answer, though. I think it was wrapping up anyway. She had a great answer.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Thomas or Monica? I think that's a great question. And like you mentioned, Harold, it's a very personal question as well. But
yeah, totally. And I would just add to that that we all have to take time sometimes and just figure out, right, like, where do we want to be next? And she had a very good point about sometimes it's not about leaving the company, it's just like figuring out within the company where do you want to go next, and then also be open about that, right? So talking to your manager, talking to others, and help them understand where do you want to head next, because they don't know, right? They might be thinking that you are happy where you are. But if you see that currently there might not be opportunity for you to grow or to get to the place where you want to be, or you want to get there sooner, right? There might be an option to look somewhere else.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I think we're down to a minute to go here. So maybe any final thoughts from any of the panelists or anybody in terms of what we just covered?
I'll only mention just in the last thing, because I think that question was important there, that much of us in finance are in charge of financial planning for our companies. It is incumbent on you to financially and overall plan for yourself. Always have your journal, always have go over every year, figure out your goals. I know not necessarily a New Year's resolution, but have your plan. And if things don't align to your plan, talk to your current job, see if they can realign, but always have a plan for yourself. And because we're really used to planning for the company, you could do both, plan for yourself as well and set yourself up for success.
Very good. Thank you, Thomas. And with that, I think we will finish. I will hand it back to you, Brittany. I want to say thank you as well to all of the panelists for the great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for such an insightful panel discussion. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Our next session will begin at 1:40 Eastern, so please click on the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected, and we look forward to seeing you there.